connotation is Anunnaki and the moon. Originally, I did go by the Albanian translation, which is how the moon is us, or the moon is okay by us, which I thought was fascinating, making a direct connection with humanity and the moon. So we have some of our history that's coming from being on the moon. So let me get the next slide. Okay. So yes, I'm a experiencer. I'm an Anunnaki contactee since 2011, which was a very strange experience. I was raised with like a religious background, Christian religious background, and so the only thing I ever knew about the Anunnaki is it might be connected to the Nephilim, and the Nephilim were demonized in certain circles. And so I went through a transformation awakening experience in 2009 and 2010, and began to be contacted. Well, I have part of my heritage is Irish, and part of my heritage is Native American. I'm part Cherokee and Patawomic Native on my grandmother's side. And so I have this like Druidic, from the Celt side, and the shaman from the other side, and I've always had a high sensitivity. And mostly what I realized early on is to just keep a low profile, even as a very young child. As you heard in the description, some of my awareness that started at 5 years old. And then when I went to first grade in a California school district, and I was 7 years old, they were actually actively looking for children, and another program kid, as we call ourselves, program kids, was, and I talked to him directly about this, was Andrew Bashago, and he said that they were looking for psychic children, remote viewing with talent, and compliant, which I thought was very interesting. They wanted cheerful, cooperative children that followed directions and were teachable. And I fit the criteria, but they couldn't quite figure out what to do with me. And then what happened, I believe, was like a divine intervention. I probably would have gone into one of those programs, but instead I went through esoteric training. So basically I was kind of taken on by my spirit guides, and quietly they began a training process where just a lot of information would come to me that didn't make any sense over the time that I was growing up. And this kept building and building, and pretty soon I had an information base or philosophy in my head that didn't match what I was taught in religion, or was taught in the political world, and in my family. I felt like there was a disconnect there, and I realized I was going to need to go on my experience, my own experience, and not just somebody else's experience explaining my worldview or the cosmos to me. So during this transformative experience, I mean, I'll just be straight up. I believe that I had an implant put in me to keep me, since I didn't end up in their program, they didn't want me to cause any trouble. So somehow or another, I had an implant. And I didn't know that until it broke. And what kind of happened is I had this high energy, moment where everything's kind of crashing on me. I called it like a mind storm. Like everything was coming to me that my beliefs were changing. And then there was literally a piezoelectric sound in my head. It sounded like the little watches that do an alarm, like this ping. And then I was extremely disoriented for a while. And then I, for all intents and purposes, I got a README file, or a download of what this device had been. And it had been to make me go further into religion and hierarchy systems, in order to keep me so busy with the hierarchy systems that I didn't do whatever it was I was supposed to do. And so, I basically said when the implant broke, my whole world changed. And then not too long after that, I started meeting my spirit guides, which I believed were always there. But I never had such direct contact. So it was just one after the other, ancestors, Native American ancestors, and eventually extraterrestrial ancestors. And this contact, you see this gentleman in this orange cloak here, that's a sort of a best as I can find picture of this being that I came in contact with. I never actually see his face. And this came up in a discussion of other Anunnaki contactees, how many of them can't seem to put the face together when they have contact with these beings. It's like they want to keep us not recognizing them. And I would say that's exactly the case for me as well. But I was having a personal crisis, again, a few years later. Of course, my belief systems are changing rapidly. They said I would be put on a path acceleration of my understanding of things that I would have had if I had not been interfered with when I was 7 years old. And so this being came into my life, and he gave me a name, and I'll talk about that later. But I first want to mention that the other things that I do, I'm a host with Aquarian Radio with Janet Lesson and Sasha Lesson. I've learned so much from them about the Anunnaki. I mean, it's just this huge awareness. We talk to experiencers quite a bit on the radio show, so people need to check it out. It's really awesome. And, you know, the amount of information coming through experiencers is astonishing. It's kind of overcoming the roadblock that we've come through with ufology and exopolitics, where this demanding of proof and then they hide the proof. So I'm going to get into that. So that's a real important part of my life. And I also want to talk about being the admin of the Lunar Anomaly Research Society, because this is what I'm going to be talking about, is the moon, what's happened on the moon. And our group got up to about, on Facebook, got up to about 7,500 members, and we were attacked. And I've subsequently heard other groups have been attacked in a similar way. We had to close the group down, excuse me, start over. And we're now up to about 1,500 in that group. So you can find us on Facebook, Lunar Anomaly Research Society. Wonderful researchers in that group. You're going to see mind-boggling stuff. Awesome. Oh, down at the bottom too is my email address. If you know, I love to talk to experiencers. I recently just talked to somebody, first time, never told anybody their story. That happens to me a lot. I love to hear from people. I'm real safe. You know, you can't shock me. Well, maybe you could. And I guess, and also to check aquarianradio.com. Okay, so I contacted this being literally through frequency. I was driving in my car, and I love to sing in my car because I'm a singer, and the windshield just kind of bounces the sound back to you. So I'm just singing in my car, and I had been open to the idea of doing something I called soul singing, which it didn't really have any words. It was like a scat style or glossolalia or whatever, or humming or whatever it was, singing at the top of my lungs. Suddenly my voice drops down in about the lowest register I could possibly sing, which is pretty low because I'm an alto. And this is the first time I ever voice channeled, and this name came out, or this statement came out. I am go D go Desh. And then right after that statement happened, I suddenly pretty much spoken all of these words, and they sounded like Klingon, I swear. From what I understand, the guttural sounds of Klingon and Anunnaki are kind of similar, as I've found out from other experiencers. And it's being identified to me as Anunnaki, which kind of freaked me out. Again, I had preconceptions of these beings. And then he began to tell me about himself, that first he was an ancestor, so that was important. Claimed to be pro-human faction, and he explained that they looked at us as pets or robots or, you know, androids or something. They didn't have a real feeling about us at first as being, you know, beings of any kind. And that at a certain point in his personal development and observing humans, he recognized what he said, the spark of the divine, and then became very pro-human. So then there was this weird statement that he said that when he was 9 feet tall, he didn't think that much of humans. And then when he was 12 feet tall, he changed his mind. And that was the weirdest thing I thought I ever heard. Until later, I found out, I was watching, I believe it was Charles Halt, but don't quote me on that, was talking about the tall white beings having adult onset giantism, which comes down into the human world as Marfan syndrome. So that's something that they think that Abraham Lincoln had, that he probably would have died of that, because what happens is you get all this growth, but your inner organs can't keep up with it. And so these people don't really live a full life, like Andre the Giant, or, you know, there's a number, and Akhenaten might have also had Marfan syndrome, or was just an alien, depending on how you look at it. So it was this adult onset situation. I think that he's crossed the spirits. I believe he's not alive anymore in that sense, but he's on the other side. So apparently this condition eventually got to him, and that's what Charles Halt said, is that the beings, it doesn't help their health to grow like that. He said he was a warrior or a general, and so he's very warrior-like. Everything is the warrior's code when he talks, and that was a lot of what he talked to me about. That he was a direct ancestor to me, great something grandfather somewhere along the line. I seem to tune into ancestral mindsets quite a bit, which has been really helpful in me understanding myself and where I come from. And the particular personal problem I had was understanding the divine masculine, because I had been raised in a religious context, and you know, this patriarchal mindset, it just overshadows male and female relationships. And I just kind of lost my identity. I didn't have any feeling about who I was in my sense of spirituality. So I actually got quite a bit of help from him working with me on that, and a lot of confidence, which I loved, because, you know, if you've got a 12-foot tall ancestral alien in your pocket, it gives you a lot of confidence. And he's with me whenever I feel a bit trepidatious, and has been with me actually in the process. It kind of comes and goes in my my inner world. And he's been very highly with me in this particular presentation, and told me I've really come a long way, which was nice to hear. I want to dig into his name a little, because it was very interesting. I looked it up. Agodi or Gothi is the Old Norse term for a priest or a chieftain, and there's a female equivalent to that. So it's a priest king. So it's he's the king, but he's also a priest. Those two roles combined. And then the name Godesh. Oh, I went past it. Oh, I can go back. Well, I can't. Go back. Oh, okay, go back to that slide just a second, because this is really interesting as well. Meaning it comes like the Hebrew word kadesh, which is holiness or set apart or sacred. And I got really deeply into this, and I'm gonna leave this slide up, make sure you guys capture it, because it's very, very interesting. I've got some references there for people to look up. And you get into holiness and the idea of the halo, you know. And if you go further back in how humans express spirituality, the halo actually comes from the areola of the sun, which is going back to the sun deity. So they carried forward this sun deity, you know, ring around his head, and brought it forward through, let's say, the Greek, you know, culture, Roman culture, becomes the Holy Roman Empire, comes into the Christian culture. So that's where we have this idea, and it's holy, hallowed, sanctified, sacred, separate, and separateness. A lot of real interesting ideas in that name. So there's this era, and I didn't go back far enough. Before the Greeks, and this is what I found out from my friend Skinder Hushi, who Sasha mentioned, the Albanians and the Romanians talk about a time when there was no moon in the sky. There's the Dogon culture, several cultures go back, and in their folklore, there was a time when there was no moon, and the moon, by different stories, came to be in our sky and to kind of dominate our sky. So one of my favorite, I've read him earlier on, was Emmanuel Velikovsky, and I found this quote: "The period when the moon was, when the Earth was moonless, is probably the most remote recollection of mankind. It was a time when the Earth was without a moon." And then Aristotle wrote that Arcadia and Greece, before being inhabited by the Hellenes, had a population of Pelagians. Now, my partner and I have been digging way deep into this Pelagian thing. It's not very well known in the United States. It's discussed a bit more in Europe. But they were considered the Aborigine people, you know, in Europe. And the person Pelage, who's the father of this race of people, is also Peleg in the Bible, and his name is from the earth born, which means he emerged out of the earth. So it's a very interesting idea of an ancestor that was underground and survived the cataclysms and all the ice age and all the terrible things that happened by being underground in the underworld. So I've got that reference right there for people to look at, be watching for those, because if you want to go deep, that's the way to do it. We just lost a really wonderful researcher and also an Anunnaki contactee last year, Neil Freer. I got a chance to interview him in Santa Fe a couple of years ago. And he was Anunnaki contactee since 13 years old. And I have a quote from his documentation. Let's see. How we got our moon was possibly that on a second orbit through Nibiru collided with Tiamat, driving a large part of it into what is now Earth's orbit to recongeal its Earth, dragging its moon with it to become our moon. with all of its anomalies, and that's what we're going to be talking about, anomalies. And then finally, you know, there's a spaceship moon theory, and this is a really interesting one. Some reference to the ideas that was reptilian race, two brother reptilians brought our moon into orbit. The spaceship moon theory, also known as the Vasan Shocker Baka. Okay, don't even, I should have practiced that before this talk. Sherbakov theory. Okay, got it. Is a hypothesis that claims the Earth's moon may be actually an alien spacecraft. The theory was that the moon is a hollowed out planetoid created by unknown beings with technology far superior to any on Earth. The moon would therefore consist of a hole-like inner shell, an outer shell made of rocky metallic slag, and for reasons unknown, the spaceship moon was placed into orbit around the Earth. So very interesting origin theories. That's no moon, it's a space station. Many times our science fiction is telling us things, you know, pretty straight up. They've had things revealed to them. And, you know, if you read between the lines and you know some of these stories, you kind of know what they're talking about. Okay, my next slide. See, there's a wonderful illustration. I'm not sure where it came from. I'm still looking for this, but this idea that it might be a Dyson sphere, you know, where the material is collected around it to make a shell and inside to build technology. So this is a wonderful idea, you know, some people adhere to. So that's some of the questions of our moon. Was it brought here on purpose to be some kind of, you know, base? Is it like a Dyson sphere? In this particular, you know, illustration, it shows that. And when the moon was struck, and that's some, you know, controversy about when this happened. I've actually seen the sonogram of this event that was in the Apollo era, where they had part of the, you know, accoutrement of the rocket that went to the moon dropped onto the surface, and literally the moon rang for days like a bell. So it had that indicates a metallic shell, which is very fascinating. Let's see my next slide here. And was it hollowed out by advanced tech? So these are questions that we're, you know, we're all trying to figure out about our moon, which also has a very weird aspect to it. Almost every celestial body in the solar system that we know of, you know, basically rotates, you know, and our moon always shows us one face all the time. I think that's weird. You know, everything else is rotating. We're constantly only seeing the front side of the moon. We don't see the back side of the moon unless we send a probe, or the far side of the moon. And some people say the dark side of the moon, but I must say that the lunar cycle is, of course, every 28 days or so. Eventually, every part of the moon is dark or light. So it's if you want to say dark, it would be the mysterious side of the moon, for certain. Okay, next. Okay, so here we're looking at a pre-Apollo artist rendition of the moon, and this is it. It's a gray palette. It's got craters, mountains. There's really not much to it. It's very rocky. You know, is this real? Is this the real moon? And this is what has been presented to us by National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. They're the ones that tell us what space is about, because of course we can't go out there, so we have to depend on them to tell us what's going on. But a lot of people are very frustrated. They've looked deeply into NASA's manipulations, what they're not telling us. And Bob's presentation of the Nibiru thing was awesome. Things that happen around the sun, it's a lot of high weirdness. So so people ask, and basically they've learned that from NASA, you never get a straight answer, never a straight answer, which is humorous and sad at the same time. I have come up with another, you know, abbreviation, not a space agency. Now that might blow some people's minds, but really it isn't, because we've only attained near Earth orbit with a couple jaunts out to the moon. We have all kinds of intentions and ideas that we might go to Mars, but how come we didn't do it sooner? How come we didn't make a base on the moon first, you know, and practice, you know, living in an enclosed environment, and practice, you know, retaining water and all the things that you would need to live in a biosphere on our moon? Would have been a piece of cake. Now we want to go to Mars and bypass the moon. So it's what I've come to believe is NASA is really a brand. It's really stamps, posters, postcards, missions, and it's got its own little bubble. and it really doesn't like anomalists. It really doesn't like people asking questions. It really doesn't like UFO enthusiasts, and it really doesn't like experiencers. So they basically have this, this is science and anything else is pseudoscience. I want to give you guys a great word, pseudo-skepticism. They just simply don't talk about the things that we ask questions about. So they're not really skeptic, they're pseudo-skeptic. So yes, it's this branding situation, and basically they're trying to say the moon is cold, dead, grayscale, colorless, just a bunch of rocks and dust, nothing to see here. Let's go to Mars. Yeah, all we hear every 5 minutes is let's go to Mars, you know, and that's really great to think about going to Mars. But like I said, why have we not gone back to the moon? And there's so much that I've learned about this that I can't even get into. But I mean, it bothers me because it would have made more sense to me in my thinking that we would have created biosphere types of environments on the Earth, biosphere types of things under the sea, and then eventually a moon base, and then it would seem logical to me that we would then go to Mars. And again, it's NASA branding. What are they hiding? Why are they trumping us up for Mars? And they're not, there's nothing to see, So again, we have to ask the question: is this real? I don't know, because the anomalous hunters that have developed. I belong to a wonderful new organization called the United Family of Anomaly Hunters. Myself, my partner Brett, were involved with this, trying to get out anomalies that have appeared in lunar images and Mars images and all over the solar system. Like, there's thousands and thousands of anomalous pictures, and we're not getting any answers from our space agency. So here's the thing: there is evidence that and I'm going to show it to you, that there are structures that were ancient on the surface of the moon. It's a very, very old planetary body, or body in the sky, and that there's modern structures, and they actually appear in Apollo images when we were first foraying to the moon and getting ready. I mean, we spent a lot of missions of Apollo just getting ready to go, and then we eventually went, and had these just terrifyingly brief missions, I thought, where I don't think they, I don't know why they didn't stay longer or keep going or plan to have a habitat there or whatever. But they took a lot of pictures, and some of them are very, very interesting. So I want to talk about Brett Collins Shepard. He's my research and life partner, and he's a superb anomalist, very quiet guy, doesn't blow his own horn. And he's working on a book, Digital Moon, which does talk about both the physical manipulation of images by stuff being painted over and smudged, as well as later on they develop basically Photoshop techniques, eventually becomes Photoshop techniques to scrub out stuff. And these are some of his finds. He was the progenitor of the original and current Lunar Anomaly Research Society. And these are his the things that he's found. Some people have seen this last year, the Jupiter 2 UFO on Mars. It went around probably 500,000 viewers at this point without Brett's name. The first thing they do is they say, oh, well, some anomaly hunter found this. I've asked a couple people who put that kind of report out, would you put his name in there so people can get further information? He's got more information about it, and got no response back, which is disappointing. But he does have a good friend who's been working hard to get this information out for the anomaly hunters in general. The lunar acropolis happens to be one of my favorites, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. And then this ET base, or lunar dish array, and I'm going to go really deep into this one because this is a groundbreaking one. I've been quite new to the public. Okay, so here's an anomaly. It looks like a tower or a structure. I asked him if it was smoke, because there have been reports of smoke coming off the lunar surface, and he seemed to think this was this thing would be just hugely tall. And then there's kind of a light down, I don't have a way to do a cursor, but there's a little light kind of in the right lower quadrant that's also glinting off the surface. Kind of intriguing. Let's see. I love this one. First time I saw it, I go, that looks like the Acropolis in Athens. And I found a really good picture that illustrates that. It's either a modern type city. And this was found, this was a situation where it was some computer smudged. I don't know. They just basically took a section of the moon and made it whiter, and it kind of squished this particular anomaly. And Brett, with his magic eyes, somehow saw it when it's squished state and brought it back down into the right resolution. So, like if you're cropping a picture, and if you make it too wide and too short, it'll all be squished. And he somehow saw something there, so he, made it big again, and there you go. It's pretty cool. And this one's amazing. It's multiple pictures of the same spot, and it looks like there's it's kind of color enhanced. He's real careful not to do any shading, but he color enhanced. It looks like a person, and sometimes they're there, and sometimes they're not. They're kind of moving around, so that's indicating some movie. And you need to know, one of the problems with the Apollo era, documentation is we never saw film. Very rarely saw film when film was being taken. We get stills for this very reason. They wanted to make sure we didn't see too much movement up there. A couple of times Brett has, and I don't know how to show that here, but he's animated these stills and seen some amazing stuff, because basically the lunar orbiter was doing film, and so they had action shots. So there was action going on, including UFOs flying by. But they didn't release it to the public that way. They released it to the stills. Now, the other person I work with is this last October, I started working very intensely with Dr. Ken Johnson Sr., who's kind of famous for basically having an original set. I'm his editor published, and he's a NASA whistleblower. And he has an original set of Apollo era photos. And what happened there was he worked in the data and photo control lab at the Lunar Receiving Lab at NASA. He had 3 positions at NASA, and he's been, played in some circles as never ever having worked at NASA. And that's why I helped him with his autobiography, and Brett helped him with all his photos to basically document that the archive is real. It's very real, very fascinating. And basically, he had 5 sets of Apollo images that he took care of. Whenever a university or scientist asked for a copy of a particular number, it was his job to make a copy and send it to them. And one day his boss comes in and says, you've got to throw all these images away. And he was kind of shocked. And he argued with his boss, and he said, well, can I keep a couple to give to some universities or some scientific groups to study? And I don't know, I believe his boss was just upset about the whole thing. He just says, I don't care what you do with it, just get rid of them. Well, that was a letter of the law kind of statement that Ken used to say, I don't care what you do with them, just get rid of them, was his loophole. So he kept a set, and he did donate another set to his alma mater in Oklahoma, and that set was disappeared. So this is a very difficult problem that he had, is he had this last remaining set. He's had some of his photos taken, or he let people borrow them, they didn't return them. He's been, moving several times. He's a military guy, and it's so part of what Brett and myself did for him is help him digitize everything. And just beginning of June, we got a set given to the Roswell UFO Museum and Research Center that they have there. So they have a full copy of this right now. And if you go to that kenjohnstonmedia.com, you can download copies of the autobiography missions report, which is fascinating because they put out missions reports after every mission NASA did. Those have changed over the years, so you've got some originals fresh off the press, so to speak, from that era, and the actual archive. And so this is a really important thing that's coming out. And we're all going back to Roswell during the UFO Festival on 4th of July weekend. Come and see us, Ken speaking Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We'll be there too. So if you're anywhere near New Mexico, it's going to be really amazing. So actually, there's almost no pictures of Ken's archive. I actually had access to it, so I took a picture. It's basically this large file folders, metallic, with these plastic sleeves, and he's got them slid in there to keep them safe. And he's been doing a pretty good job all these years. The colors on them is really great. But it's having to keep them and having to pretend you're a museum or you're just an individual. But this is what it looks like, and you thumb through that, and it's just like going back in time. And I was about 6 or 7 when the whole Apollo missions happened, and I just wanted to be an astronaut so bad. And I unfortunately didn't have good vision, and I found out you needed 20/20 vision, and you needed to be a boy. So I was kind of sad about that. But at least I get to have some, work with this information here now that I'm older. Okay, so I want to talk about, just a way to understand how this digital or this manipulation goes. So one way you can entertain yourself and find out, if you're looking at a NASA image of astronauts that's real or not, is that Ken Johnston, who actually trained all of the astronauts how to use the lunar module and the lunar module systems. There's like 200 switches that they had to know and gauges that they had to know. They need to know how to get in and out of the lunar module on this little, stairs that everybody sees. Underneath the lunar module was the scientific experiment packages that they needed to deploy and be able to use. And that was his job. And he has his logbook with all of these signatures from the astronauts when he was working with them to do this training. He basically was a civilian astronaut consultant pilot. So he officially was an astronaut. He just didn't go into space. His job was on the ground training, and he was a pilot. So that was his background. So he, flew. He knew how to help them learn how to fly this weird contraption that we had invented. So if you can see on this little astronaut diagram, there's the antenna. Before they came out of the lunar module, they put the antenna up, and it had to be up the whole time, or they didn't have any contact with Houston for instructions and safety reasons. And then just before they went back up the ladder, they couldn't put their own antenna down. They had to do the buddy system there, and so they wouldn't snap it off when they're climbing up, into the hatch. So knowing this, this is a way that you can now look at NASA pictures and have some knowledge. So here's a picture where you see the antenna. In fact, you see stars in the sky in this sort of grainy picture. They told us you can't see the stars when you're on the moon. Well, there they are. But it's important to be on antenna watch. So here's one of the most famous pictures of an astronaut on the moon. It was even spoofed by MTV. It's very famous. And you notice two things. One, the sky's painted black, and there's no antenna. It's like, how's he communicating with Houston? So yeah, so here's the package again, showing this VHF antenna, and you don't see it right there. It's not visible, and the sky's painted black. We know that because we've talked to the people who did it. Whoops. Okay, so here it is again. The sky's painted black, and this time the antenna doesn't have the sky behind it. It has a crater behind it. Again, they have smudged it up for some reason. So we're not sure why they did it. We know, and also when you paint the sky black, there is one feature: you can make a false horizon. So if there was any kind of city or dome or anything that was on this background or horizon, it basically would be covered over. So this is, I think, one of the main reasons why they painted the sky black, as well as the fact that astronauts eventually fessed up and said there was UFOs watching them, and so they maybe had to not have those be available to the public. So yeah. Can you hear me now, Houston? No antenna. You can see a smudge and maybe the top of the antenna right there. But they almost like they copied some of the soil picture over here and planted it over here. You almost can see it because you can see a little bit of the antenna left. So that's some pretty serious tampering with history, don't you think? Oh, I missed a slide. So I don't know if I can go back to it. I'm trying to see it. No, it's just making me go forward. Well, that's great. Oh, it's making me go back. I can do this. Okay, this has caused people to ask questions. Did we go to the moon? So these are the various theories. We didn't. It was all fake. I don't exactly personally believe that. I do believe they did make some footage just in case there was a catastrophe. I know Stanley Kubrick supposedly was supposed to be in on that, and he's very likely, very talented. So, we had a situation where there's failure was not an option when we went to the moon. So they might have just decided to, have some fictional that we landed on the moon, yay. And when they come back, something bad happens. And there you go. We did go to the moon, but we had help. That's a very popular theory, especially involving when we think that the Anunnaki or other aliens were involved in us going to the moon, or we had a secret space program that was already in place during the time the Germans had been working with anti-gravity craft. Okay, so we did go to the moon, but what we discovered required a cover-up plan. I strongly believe that's a possibility because, you know, they gave us this runaround about how there's nothing there of interest except some rock. And in the last one, the whole program is a cover-up for a secret space program. I strongly, strongly believe that to be the case. I'm not going to go too much into the secret program in this, but, you know, this was like a show. This was, I learned an interesting way to put things from my guides. I did a lot of automatic writing, and this is what came out. Theatrics. We have a lot of theatrics in our politics and religion, and in our things that we do, war and military things that we do. Theotricks, the tricks of the god. So they've been theatrically manipulating us for a long time, and now we do it to ourselves when we watch television and mainstream media. I love this slide. I had it in another video, and this is the most interesting statement. Carl Sagan is rumored was part of Majestic 12 that Bob talked about. And he made this psychic prediction, which no scientist would ever do, supposedly before we sent a probe around the backside of the moon. Predicting, right, which I don't think he predicted, I think he knew, whether there would be structures on the moon or alien artifacts. And he said in 1962, forthcoming photographic reconnaissance of the moon from space vehicles, particularly of the back, might bear these possibilities in mind. In the era of caution and credibility in science, that is a very bold statement. And I really believe that he'd actually seen these structures already and was being cheeky with us because we never really did see them, did we? I just want to reiterate, we worked on this book with Ken. I think there's so much in there of value. I hope people check it out. I've gained so much being with Ken and hearing how, you know, that whole era was, and we're having a phenomenal human experience learning from Ken. So this was what came out of the collaboration between Brett and myself and Ken, and that was, Brett's looking, he looks at pictures and he literally stares at them until his eyes get red, and he has this intuitive, like there's something here, and then he finds things. And this picture was one of the original, you know, you can look at it, it's a photo, 8 by 10. And basically, he is looking at this photo from a camera that was mounted on a lunar module. You're looking at the command module that goes around the moon and never lands. And it's an automatic camera, so it's just like clicking, 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 clicking like that. And it clicks this picture. And that is remarkable because I've never really heard of craters that are in a straight line. We've actually had a few NASA people say that with a straight face, that these craters in a straight line. If you order this particular image now from the database, or you look it up, that is smudged out. It is in Ken's collection, and that's why his collection is so valuable. And have a look at that. That is incredible. To me, it looks like a dish array. I studied parabolic dish array stuff. I just went out to the big dish array, the VLA, very large array, out in New Mexico, and that is what we pretty much think that is. Seems like dish arrays would be used for multiple things on the moon, gathering, you know, energy from the sun for power, communication. I wonder if they're aimed at us. What do they mean by that? Picking up our television, which I pity them on that one. And so that wasn't the only place that there was some dishes. Here's a spot where Brett found some dishes on the moon, and I managed to find a picture of dishes on the Earth, which gave you that idea of that oblique view, what that looks like. It's just absolutely remarkable. This is in a lunar orbiter photograph, and there's the number. And here's another one that's a dish or crater. So it would be a very odd crater because it has a shadow under it, and it's absolutely perfect parabolic shape. And again, there's the number. You know, you can't find these on the NASA database, but you can find them in Ken's archive. So this was another anomaly that was found. It's sort of a craft that's flying. This is not the command module. This is something else. It's not the command module. It's the command module taking the picture, so it wouldn't be. And I thought it looked remarkably like this particular thing from the Mayan culture, or perhaps a Vimana. And it's in multiple photographs. There's a couple there. And it's sort of upright. Okay. Now, this is an interesting thing. It's cables on the moon. So it's a little hard to see in this picture, the way it's oriented. I'll try to get some close-ups for you. But it's basically these cables, large, huge cables. And this one is terminating into this large light. So we don't know what those cables are for. It could be some kind of highway or transportation system, communication system. Like here it is, it's terminating, it kind of swoops under, down the hill and under and up into this tower. I think this tower looks a little bit like a Tesla tower that he did in Colorado. It looks, except maybe with a bigger top. So I think it was very interesting. Here it is close up. So there you see the cable coming down, and it just kind of hits the bottom of this tower. And this, you know, if they're trying to be shy up there, they're not doing a good job with this giant light that's going right there. So there's a lot of speculation amongst our team on what that is. Here's another one that's kind of fun. So you have an astronaut taking the picture. You have an astronaut standing in front of the lunar rover. And what's that off in the distance? What's that about? I think I got a close-up of the guy. It looks like the Stay Puft Marshmallow guy. But yeah, there's this figure in the back. And you have to be very tall to be on that horizon line and be that size. So these are some of the anomalies that are coming out of this collection. And we really haven't turned this over deeply to our, we've been so busy just getting it preserved, we haven't turned it over to our anomaly friends, and they're getting very excited just what they're seeing. So meanwhile, back to the Anunnaki and ancient ruins on the moon. So that's kind of the modern stuff, right? So an indication there's somehow modern technology on it. Here is, oh, hit it again, wrong again. Let's try and get this right. It's a little smudgy. I'm sorry, that's the resolution they give us. Luna City, this was discovered by Brett Collins Shepard, and I'm going to guide you through what you're looking at right there. He did a great diagram. There's an effigy of statue here. There's stars in the background. This whole horizon line was painted over, so you could not see this particular thing. But in the original photograph, you can see it on the horizon line. There's a wall. It kind of comes down to it's sort of an octagonal or septagonal kind of wall. And it comes down, there's an object there with a shadow. This wall has these huge circles in them. We're not sure if they might have been water cisterns or something. There's these structures with pentagon walls right here. There's a real tall one right there. It looks like you know, I've seen pictures of some islander structures that they do just to kind of keep off the rain. I don't know what that's about, but it's very, very large structure right there. Some inner walls and rooms. You see the other wall on the right-hand side. These pipes, and you get a closer look at those, and I don't know if I've got a closer look at these large, like irrigation types of pipes. And then I worked on trying to understand this fallen head statue here. It looks like a effigy or something on its side. The city looks pretty damaged or eroded by time. It's pretty amazing. And again, it was painted out, the original picture. That's kind of what it looks like. So here's what blew my mind was this effigy looked like what's called the Romanian Sphinx. And if you know anything about this part of Romania, this Sphinx is over an underground base, and underground is written, this is written up in a book by Radu Sinamar and brought to us by Peter Moon. In English, is Transylvania's Moonrise, Territory Sunrise. There's a whole series of books there about the Bashigi Mountains and this Sphinx. And underneath is this underground base with all kinds of holographic technology that they found, and tables and chairs for people that are 9 feet tall, really tall. And so, you know, you feel like a little kid, I'd imagine, being in there. But this is a real interesting story I've talked about a few times in other locations, but I was just amazed how similar those two sort of statue-like, eroded statues are like. So, you know, we got to talk about underground base, because we're seeing some things on the surface, but we're not seeing a lot. It looks like a post-apocalyptic sort of thing from the past with some maybe recovery and use of technology in the future. But it seemed like it'd be kind of convenient to be underground if you're on the moon. You know, I think the moon likely has real estate underground that's still intact. I believe there is a moon base. I don't know if humanity is part of that moon base or not. I believe that it's primarily under ET control. And, you know, it might be shared. It might be shared operations. You know, my research kind of goes into it, but I just have a feeling that about the underground story. One underground story is is there's an underground city on Earth called Nev-Seher, and it's largely unexplored, but it's in Cappadocia, and it could house 20,000 people. So there could be I mean, that's everybody with there needs to use the bathroom, needs to have air, needs to cook a meal. I mean, that's amazing. How did they accomplish that and live there? And why did they do it? I mean, what scared them so bad, or what kind of conditions were outside that they felt living underground was a better deal? So here's, this came to me, it was like a download one day. Underground first. It might be standard protocol for spacefaring races to explore a planet or a moon by establishing an underground facility first to be able to control the environmental conditions before exploring the surface. So they go, let's say a scouting away mission goes from the mothership down underground, where somehow with force fields or lasers or something, they cut out some space. They could even transport it, and like Star Trek, just a chunk of, make a hole. And then they can create the perfect conditions for them, whatever kind of atmosphere they want to breathe, how high the ceilings have to be if they're really tall. And that's, to me, that seems like they'd be standard procedure, because living on the surface would be, you don't have control of the environmental situation. So I think this story of the underground is going to be big this year, because I think this is a key to understanding our history. They're in Kuyu, of course, very famous, again, huge underground area. They had a very interesting, you see this in, I believe, some shows about the underground, where they had the ability to defend it by walling out, like if an enemy tried to overrun them. Of course, it's like a labyrinth, how they're going to find their way around. And also they could corner the enemy and block off doors quickly and, protect themselves. So they either had a direct attack from enemies, or they had some kind of cataclysmic. There's a lot going on that make you want to leave the beautiful sunshine of our Earth and go underground, and maybe it wasn't so great on the surface. Let's see. Okay, my slide stopped. Why did it stop? I'm gonna have to bring back up again. Everybody still with me? Let's see if we can get it back again. Well, I don't know why they stopped. That's very interesting. They don't come back.
I see you going back and forth on things, but you can just select it and start it up again.
Yeah, I'm doing it. Okay, so far so good. How much time do I have to on that?
Let me check. Hold on.
All right. Because I did want to get into.
You go till 12. You go till 3:10, and it's what is it? Like you have 9 minutes.
Okay, I'm gonna go very quick to this stuff, because I did want to address what the Linkage Institute. That is a story that's unfolding. I was part of what's called the Latter-day Airborne Group, and several of us have coming out that we were involved in these programs, and definitely want to talk about it at a future conference. So living underground could be very pleasant. It didn't have to be rocky. Okay, I actually discovered an anomaly. I want to share it with you. It's really fun. This is an Apollo 16 mission picture. I was able to have a digitized copy of it, so I was able to zoom in really well. So this is John Young. He had too many rocks, so he flings the rocks up in the air just to see what would happen in low gravity. Kind of famously almost loses his balance. This picture has the typical blackened out sky, false horizon, but I saw something up in the sky, and I was stunned, because all the stars are painted out. And when I got a really good close-up of it, it's not easy to see here, it was painted around. So whoever was painting out the stars painted around this anomaly. And it sat in Ken's collection all these years just for me to find and bring it to you. It's amazing. These photos were quickly altered, sent to California, made into slides, or made into photos that people could have, and Ken had this in his collection all this time, and this was not found. So here's showing the cutout. I'm an artist, so I can see the strokes. Isn't that something? Isn't that something?
Wow.
Yeah. So when they said they saw stuff, they had ships watching them, this is kind of what they were talking about. So I want to go into this a little bit, because in the Hoagland era, when Ken was showing this to Richard Hoagland and Mike Vera and the team there that put it in some of this information in the book Dark Mission, it was they were sitting there with Fran Johnston, which is Ken's wife, and she thought to herself, well, if they don't want us to see something, they, you know, it would be behind them. They'd somehow make sure that we couldn't see it. And she figured out it might be reflected in the visor of the astronaut. So this is what she found, and this was like amazing because I'm a Trekkie, and I thought, oh my gosh, it's the Tribble base from, you know, Star Trek. But you got to realize that Gene Roddenberry was an insider. He got inside information all during the Apollo era, which coincided with the Star Trek era. So here, I thought, if you can see it a little bit closer, you see that. How interesting, both of those are kind of the space station-y look, you know, where they have like prongs sticking out of them. They're not exactly like, oh, hey, this is the next slide. But let me go back to that. They're not exactly alike, but it's not a disc, it's not a rod, it's that's the space station, and it's hovering above the astronauts, you know, behind the guy taking the picture. And in the background of that that particular photo I just showed you, and I was very proud of myself. I usually don't find a lot of anomalies. I'm usually a interpreter researcher. So this is my, you know, like high-fiving myself a bit. So I want to talk a little bit more about the Anunnaki and the moon. I got, everyone needs to know about this website, Inky Speaks. Oh my gosh, Sasha and Janet, you guys have, that's the best website for a nascent and Anunnaki enthusiast to sort out who's who, for one thing. It's a tremendously long history. And, you know, what all they're doing, I mean, it's like a soap opera. But this is a wonderful site. I go to it time and time again, just to kind of brush up on the history. So I want to kind of bring out a couple of little moon-related Anunnaki stories. One was Nanar, who ruled in Ur, and he was great. He was a great manager. He got their wool garment garment district going. He developed trade. He had half Earthling, half Anunnaki staff, and he just made the city really pumping, really happening, very place to be, wealthy. And so, you know, he was really popular with the Earthlings and the Anunnaki both, because he knew how to manage a city. Well, unfortunately, war came, and they basically had a nuclear war, and the fallout came over his city, and he was like, you know, how come you're abandoning me? You know, sort of, you know, how come you're abandoning me in my city, and you give me this kingship, and you let this, you know, be destroyed? It was very, very upsetting. So he fled the city, and it got out in time, but the nuclear storm, you know, crippled the city, destroyed it. It was devastating. And actually, it says he fled to the moon and waited for the radiation to dissipate. So we're starting to realize that the moon, and we know they had assets on Earth, we know they had assets on Mars, but the moon was kind of their, you know, one of their places to come when things weren't going right. And basically, he was upset again when war came to his you know, world, and he angrily left the Earth again for his place on the moon. His place. You know, I don't know. Was that his mansion? Was that his city? It's interesting. It's almost like it was always there waiting for him, and he could just retreat there at any time. And I just included this anomaly by Richard Hoagland called a castle. So I thought maybe that's where he was at. But yeah, that's a very interesting thing. And then in the Lost Book of Enki, of course, it's been referred to before. I love the stories in this book about the moon, and it's what they kind of realized is that the moon was kind of a great way to depart from. So if they could get from the Earth to the moon and overcome Earth's gravity, then it was easy to jump off the moon out into the solar system, go to Mars, wherever, instead of trying to pull straight up from the Earth. You know, it was like a hopscotch, you know, stone for them. And so they basically, it says, keep Marduk astronaut boss and reassign the flyboys to a moon base. I love the translation here. And the net pull of gravity, it greatly exceed Lamus, and so which is Mars. And to overcome it, our power shall be exhausted. Let us take an alternative, use the nearby moon. Smaller is its net pull, ascent and descent. Therefore, a little effort will require. So they're, you know, trying to conserve fuel and resources, and made it a way station. So this is great. And so Enki and Marduk went there, and so Anu said to Enki, let the moon be examined. So they're going to look into it as a base. And in a rocket ship did Enki and Marduk go to the moon. In a place of rolling hills, they set the rocket ship down. They had to use their Eagles helmets, which were some kind of space helmet to breathe, because the air was very, well, some people say they don't have any air. And some have said, like John Lear, that does have an atmosphere, but it's just pretty thin. Let's see. So Marduk's father's brother-in-law gave Marduk rule of the transshipment facility on Mars, but of course that was destroyed. So Marduk lost his command, so he's kind of put out. So they put Marduk on the moon, and they surveyed the moon as an alternative base. On the moon, Enki gave Marduk vast scientific information. He told Marduk he'd help him reclaim his right to rule. So they set up base. So this is a really long time ago. So again, ancient. And then I love this poetic section right here. Let the moon be first examined, the king they did advise. Let the moon be first examined. Honor to Enki and Enlil, the decision beamed. Enki was greatly joyed. The moon to him always was alluring. Whether somewhere waters it is hiding, what atmosphere it possesses, he did always wonder. In sleepless nights, its silvery cool disk with bewitchment he observed. Its waxing and waning, a game with the sun played, a wonder of wonders he deemed. What secrets from the beginning it held he wished to uncover. And that is exactly how we feel today. We really, it's a mystery to us and still unresolved, but just hoping through this effort of people asking questions and finding anomalies and embarrassing the powers that be, that we actually get some of those questions answered. And so finally, I just want to thank everybody for this opportunity to interact with you, to learn more about the cosmos we share. Thank you so much. And any questions?
Karen, thank you. That was wonderful. Do tell everybody briefly, you've got about 2 minutes maybe, or a minute. Just tell us a little bit about A.R. Borden's Linkage Institute.
Well, there's sort of 3 iterations of A.R. Borden. One is the Life Physics group, and that was a group of renegade physicists who discovered a lot of things, primarily looked into the holographic universe, which they call the idiomaterial universe. It's all made of thought. And we're very interested in human capacity, you know, the powers that we obviously inherited from our ancestors. And also the Linkage Institute was a little bit later, and that was these groups of these life physics and other people who interacted with ET. And really the big question is humanity ready to rule itself instead of being managed by the Anunnaki?
Tie AR into the Anunnaki real quick before we run out of time. Okay,
yeah, he absolutely, and this has been denied by others, he absolutely was a abductee, contactee. Both he and his father were abducted. He had a lifelong involvement with them. He gathered up other contactees there towards the last few. We lost him in 2013, and I'm one of them, and Michael Hill and others that have come out. And we're kind of we lost him, so it kind of was tough on us, you know. And then we all come back because the material is so compelling. So we are trying to get more and more of that information out, hopefully in subsequent.
What about their meetings last week? What about the meetings that AR attended with the Anunnaki?
Yeah, that was called the Link. That was called the Link, and it involved sort of like a human ambassador group, and also met with a council of other beings. I don't believe that the humans got to really participate verbally. You know, basically discussing humanity's future. Humanity is somewhat of a thorny problem in the whole galactic consideration, which I can't get into that right now, but the key issue is us getting ready to manage our own affairs instead of being managed. So that's really the key question that they discuss, and it's still being discussed as far as I know.
All right, we'll have to discuss.
Karen, how did Borden say the Anunnaki spared us the terrible things that could happen during the perigee solaris of Nibiru?
Well, there was a couple of things that came out. I'll just have to go straight up into it, how it was for me. Basically, we had a group of us that did a group meditation to intend that the perigee would be different, re-altered, probably to pull us into a different timeline. There's several of us that are now coming out with that we were on that team. It was written about by several researchers. And when I was in that program, I got a download about how it wasn't so much that we were really doing it, but our intention was allowing us to be aware and learn of the levels and layers of protection that we had. And I think those of us that were in the program have talked about becoming aware of how cared for we are at so many levels, all the way from our cosmic parents, Anunnaki, all the way up to celestial beings that are giving us a chance. And, you know, what we got to do is continue to have intention toward peace and getting along with each other, acceptance, taking care of everyone on the planet. Very key. The key to space is you feed everyone, you clothe everyone, make sure everyone is cared for.